Good morning, Tashidele, and welcome to the 8th World Parliamentarians Convention on Tibet. We are all living in challenging times, as you can imagine, and the pandemic is still not over. But despite that, we're very grateful that all members of parliament and delegates who have come here from different places have taken the time to be here in support of Tibet, and we thank you for that. We're also very grateful to Speaker Pelosi and the congressional officers who have made this convention possible here, despite all the challenges that they had to go through over this period. And it's good that this may be one of the first few public gatherings that we're having in such a situation. So thank you for this. In 1959, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama had to flee Tibet after the Chinese occupation, one of the first things he did was to establish what is now called the Central Tibetan Administration, with a two-pronged objective of looking after the socio-economic welfare of the Tibetan people and finding a solution to the Tibetan problem by which the Tibetan people can return back to Tibet in dignity and in freedom. In support of that, we have had international public giving strong assistance to the Tibetan people, which is very much reflected in the international parliamentarians and parliaments taking different initiatives to help the Tibetan people. Your presence here, members of parliament from different countries, is a testimony to that support, and we thank you again for this. In Dharamsala, His Holiness the Dalai Lama made sure that the Central Tibetan Administration ran along democratic lines, and today we have a democratic governance system under which the Tibetan Parliament is the supreme legislative body which is responsible for all the initiatives that the Central Tibetan Administration takes. The Tibetan Parliament represents the Tibetan people, and so today we begin this morning session with the Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament, the Honorable Khenpo Tempela. He was born in Tibet, raised in India, got religious education in India, and as per the Tibetan political system tradition, he came to the Tibetan Parliament representing a tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, which was a way for the Tibetan people to preserve and promote Tibetan culture and way of life, even within this democratic governance system. So, Khenpo Tempela. After the Khenpo speaks, we'll have the privilege of waving a video message from His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Thank you, Pujungla. Tashidele, and good morning to all. The most honorable Speaker of the U.S. House, Representative Nancy Pelosi, respected session of the Central Tibetan Administration, the Chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet, Mr. Gere, the President of National Endowment for Democracy, Mr. Dirkson, and the honorable members of Parliament from across the world. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all the distinguished parliamentarians from across the world to this convention. It is certainly an honor for me to address this esteemed gathering on behalf of the Tibetan Parliament in exile. I would like to thank all of you for taking out time from your busy schedule to show your solidarity for the just cause of Tibet. With the growing unethical and inhuman atrocities around the world in general, and in Tibet by the leadership of the People's Republic of China in particular, to have such convention and bring all the like-minded decision makers on one platform becomes pivotal. Till date, we have had 7 World Parliamentary Conventions on Tibet in various countries. All the WPCD had been possible with the co-host Parliamentary Tibet Support Group of those countries. The third WPCD was held in Washington, D.C. in 1997 with the strong support from late Congressman Benjamin Gilman, and his team include Honorable Incumbent Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Likewise, This convention is possible with the unflinching support from Honorable Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Honorable U.S. Representative Jim McGovern, and many other friends in the U.S. Congress who are friends of His Holiness and Tibet. Without their support, this convention could not have been possible within a very short period of time. The situation inside Tibet is still remains grim and painful, despite the false lofty claims of being liberated and developed. Tibetans are denied of the most basic human rights, as also enshrined in the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Any form of aspiration that against the dictates of Chinese Communist region can have severe consequences of ending up in prison. While Chinese authorities are marketing Tibet a tourist destination based on spiritual attention on the Buddhist culture and landscape, Beijing has tightened its control over Tibetan religious aspiration and practice. The communist leadership, who explicitly reject even the idea of past and future lives, are busy meddling in the system of reincarnation, and especially the reincarnation Dalai Lama. PRC not only went control to Tibet territory, but they also dream to have control over the minds of Tibetans by capturing the institution of Dalai Lama for the political end, which we reject in the strongest word, and we want the free world to follow suit. The space for the Tibetan to protect, preserve, and practice Tibetan Buddhist culture and identity is shaken severely. Since 2009, 158 known cases of Tibetans from every sector of life have set themselves on fire in one of the biggest political protests in human history. Yet instead of addressing to the cause of this desperation, PRC has strengthened very wrong policies that caused it. In a nutshell, Tibetans in Tibet continue to face political repression, cultural and social exclusion, economic and educational marginalization, and massive environmental destruction. In exile, democracy in the gift of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the people of Tibet, we have democratic and popularly elected leadership that is accountable to the Tibetan Parliament in exile, the Central Tibet administration governed by rule and regulations with transparency and accountability in governance. Despite having 1,000 years of history of being an independent country, we are sincere and committed to the middle way policy to resolve the conflict between Tibet and China through a mutually beneficial way. We urge the leadership of PRC to show historical responsibility and political wisdom to come to the table to resume the stocked talks with the representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama if you are sincere in your call for stability of mainland China. The Tibetan refugee community is thriving around the world with the kind humanitarian help from a number of governments and the people of these countries, especially India, who has been to host to His Holiness and Central Tibetan administration for more than 6 decades. Like yours, Tibet and Tibetans are indebted the unwavering support by the government and people of United States of America for support the just cause of Tibetan in many ways, such as passing of the Tibet policy and support at 2020, reciprocal as to Tibet aid, and the appointment of the special coordinator for Tibet, Gere, to name a few. This gesture truly supports our belief in democratic values, boosts the morale of our suffering Tibetans inside Tibet, and our hope in our movement. Any such story of ours can become an inspiration for many other nationals in the world who are making an attempt to accomplish their rightful cause. Thus, the sharing and learning from the experience among the striving nationals could be crucial in building our case stronger. Through such convention, we hope more and more nations come forward in following the footsteps of the United States in passing such acts to make differences in the lives of the suffering humanity and not succumb to the dictates of authoritarian regions like PRC. The outbreak when COVID-19 pandemic has shown to world how fragile human existence is and how interdependent our existence is. The arrogance of communist Chinese leadership was saving their own image and not sharing early findings and data on the virus has led to the death of millions of people around the world. Even now, while we are meeting here in Capitol Hills, millions of Chinese people are facing the brunt of the Xi's wrong zero-COVID policy. My heart goes out to all of them. The leadership of PRC should be held accountable for bringing such magnitude of messages to the humanity. My speech would not be complete if the Tibetan Parliament in exile and I failed to show our solidarity with the people of Ukraine who are suffering under the invasion. Since Tibetan has gone through it, we can relate with the appalling situation there. His Holiness the Dalai Lama endorses to engage in dialogue rather than war and blessed to solve the differences. We Tibetans firmly believe that no one can get happiness by giving pain and grief to others. We pray for this world to end at the earliest and make this world be a better place for all to live in peace and harmony. I end my speech here with the hopes that this convention would pave the way forward in injecting more zeal and commitment among the decision makers to stand with Tibet. I urge to be vocal on the pressing issues of Tibet in your respective countries and to make the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and his people possible for the wishes of the martyrs who have laid their lives for Tibet. Thank you.
그게 아까 워싱턴이야 표준 잡죠 속과 카몽고 지기 메나 좀세 엔 도스 코토는 기여를 해 장상을 올려 거진 실신 쇼기 안에 아주 벽이 된다디 초직내 된들이 니네 ane pögi ane tondadi azu semgam rigwe ane semgi shidida chamzi dindrigi da shenyan zo yindaba jigi chadiru zane kanda pödun pödun di chebsi ikirishiko mari kanda pögi rikshon semgi shidi druyagi semgi shidi druyada te gyumzenla tene yishishigo mayima gyumzenla tene semgam ribada dreni ene semgi shidi druyajigi te gyagara kebe monebe rishun pyu takshuji ene tiru gyabenane ene kenji shiozo pöle pene to suje chade yore te rangshi ngazo pöba 촌주지기네 에네 부마스사로 지기 진짜게 그게 진행지 넘주르지 촌주간에 여더지기 아주 진짜게다 kumshi yodebe miri shade yore. Sada dindegi miri digi da sangbu kumshi yodebe di pimisa mayinbe da rinbegi chik zambulingi sajab digala ene pa rinbegi chamzasade tona saba leya chikda di thola nga zu phe miri gi chi pege shenyu yongensu 지 그래서 투두 샴데 주트야 지기 배주 아주 시기 열어라 배주 시기나 아주 고급 야구 예배 소리도 내가 아주 배주고 돌아게 말해 전문이 지용 거라 에네 지 상황 시들 가지는 제 에네 시디 자워르데 에네 서버상고 차대요래 에네 나란조 지금 세버 상고시아 생애디 말한서 내기 그 semjen turusunji 게마탈이야 매 참지 초대버지 차대여봐. 자상고 정실 한지기 말한서 소셜 turusun지로 가다 참지 많이 누시 초대버지기 참지 초대야지. 애는 말한서 배워 미지 명문의 대회잖아요. 매 참지 원에 아니 야도 그 살론체 엔다 가다 견저로디 아주다 시행의 대전나를 쇼유도산에 아니 시행의 대전나를 지당게다 노초네 야 용대베 시 응강감 리보다 지 진짜 조셔마도 생강 리비 그 생기 시디 주다도 거라 한테 계시란 메도가 더 드리게서 노주의 캐완데 지금 생강 리보망에 된다기 신에다 간수직이다 생기 시디 주야게 참지셔야겠디 신의 돈아 사버지 요네도 자상가 말한저 안데 지금 생강 리보 아니 생기 시디 참지 공부 동야게 아니 진짜게 생강 리보 신인데다 등득 잡을는게 뭐 이야기하기 신인이오디 송도 줘야지 가서 패시 용토리 수도수이네 되긴 되는 스타로 되기 자와로데 세마상 붙여야더라도 봐 미지인 시절을 소여로 때 다가서 또 좋아 간다 에너지 최세기 지금 스무살을 같이 예배 핑거 말에 semlya chamjit 초시 예배 주나 소소가와 요스데 셈 기본야지 그때 용도가 사진제 인도 말아서 벽이 원에 지기다 리슌디 셈컴 리보드 제니 최이게지고 말에 시 사수야 루스야로 되게지도 말에 가다 최명의 집이나야 선보상고시는 기회여로 사진제 인도 지금 알아서 벽이 원에 전에게다 리슌 소로디 참지들이샤 사다디 아주 안도보도 지금 아주 센줄레디 여러데기네 그래서 토도기 지금 그게 다고로 겹쳐도서지 그 누구지 통구도 그냥 아래만에 샤샤네 근데지 타네야다 살롱셔가지 샤인데 지 가와시베이네 참지생에디 제셔를 겹쳐지 제되기 사들이 인도 다 데려다가 한다 계지식 손도든지 새벽거도로 저 벽이 첩시가 강에 rel라 저 벽이 리슌디 냐버 소시 매년 공부 영향가 데이터를 change 투구 숙세스 셰토나 대가도 첩시가 타네 랑전식이 있으게 말이 냐버 로카시아 권에 내세월러이 아주 랑전 쪽에 메스 아니 그 리슌 다 NKD 송조치야디 시부지 개셔부도 우선 내도 셰디요 이 첼시가 전에 캐나다 게드로가 개민도 애는 뭐이네서 들게서 캐나나라 남배철로 통화싱에 치마시마 조디도가 자 된지기다 나다가 원에 아주 벽이 쳐도 리슌디 지 냠보 소주 민영 공부 야오지 중도나 별 미리지고 뭐인데 다지 홀 미리 카드에디 소리 카드에디 되는 뭐 하는데 쳐서 자나랑 나를 샤샤나 벽 리슌 사바상고지야 여러지야 리슌디 자나 저불랭기 멤버 치시예베 계급나든 계급디 나로라 뭐냐 전에 그게 판도 용도하지 샤드샤 아니 뒤쳐도 되니 최고적으로 쓰고 말해 낭보적으로 쓰고 말해 수수 최대 연애리 매내리 미상부셔야지 어디 나서 계산이네 아메 참부쳐야지기 된지기 참지 넘주저리 뒤쳐도 되면도 봐 저기 산이기 용기여로 봐 자상가 아주 된지기다 제 서버상부셔야기 미규디 지 맞아 배워라 야오샤 야오리 다데도 봐 갸르 시게토나 에네 메몽골이야 패도 연구리 삼니 trende기 나랭은 차샤네 내 다시도 최배야 낭수배야 되게 시그메 가도 서버상고 쳐고 시기요 자상하다 대리안에 자주 손도 뒤타라 벽에다 리슈 님부르디 서버상고 쳐야겠다 리슈 어디 아니 냠보 소주 매년 공부용이야 더라 아니 자주 공부도 시시제 엔팅두기 신용이 대상에 나라려야 최대 만지에 여러 개 잡아려야 된대지기다 수로 겹도나 이 판도 연구를 삼정기도 현다인 투시
I want to introduce our next speaker this way. Those who know Washington's political system know that Congress plays an important role. And every year, every day, every month, in fact, every minute, there are thousands and thousands of lobbyists hired by governments, individuals, corporations, trying to have some say inside Congress so that Congress can pass legislation that can be beneficial to these issues. But the Tibetan issue has been very fortunate to get bipartisan support. That too, people with hearts. And among those, if you count at the top, is our next speaker, Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Since coming into office in the 1980s, and I've been privileged to be in many meetings that the speaker has had, I can see that she feels Tibet in her heart. And that can be seen in many of the initiatives we have in the Tibetan community, whether it's the developmental programs inside Tibet, humanitarian assistance programs for Tibetan refugees, whether it's the political support for the dialogue, whether it's for support for His Holiness the Dalai Lama and his initiatives, what His Holiness described here. Everything has Speaker Pelosi's imprint. Therefore, it gives me great honor to welcome Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Good morning, everyone. It is such a great honor as Speaker of the House to welcome you to the Capitol, to our campus here. So many visitors from so many countries, so many members of Parliament. Such a show of power and respect for what His Holiness told us. Tibet is about truth. It's about science, love, and compassion to have peace. Weren't we just warmed by his beautiful, beautiful words, as always. For our newcomers here, it is my honor to be with Richard. Well, I'll acknowledge some of the others who are here, but to be here with the speaker and the speaker, that is a special treat for me. And I thank you for your kind words and your friendship over the years. When I first came to Congress in my very first year, I had the privilege, now that was 35 years ago, I had the privilege of meeting His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I couldn't even believe it because it was such an honor, such a thrill. And my colleague Tom Lantos, who's been a friend of the cause for now in heaven, but nonetheless then brought us together. And His Holiness told us about his agenda for autonomy. He told us about respecting the environment. And we were all thrilled to know that he was the first person who ever received the Nobel Prize who had nature and environment in the testimonial about him. So for so many reasons, it is more than an honor, it's a privilege to have been associated with the cause of Tibet, its autonomy, as His Holiness discussed, as well as what it does in terms of love, compassion, peace, and truth. As speaker, again, it's my privilege to welcome such distinguished leaders here and friends of Tibet to the 8th World Parliamentarians Convention on Tibet. And it's special for us because the meeting is now in the United States once again. Today we gather to reaffirm our nation's shared commitment to the Tibetan people wherever they are, and that is unwavering. Again, it is a special treat to hear from my dear friend, our dear friend, someone we admire on a pedestal, a great man, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Let us salute the courageous Tibetan leaders who have traveled here together. Well, now here we are. Thank you so much. Former Speaker of the Parliament, and now in such an exalted position. The Speaker, whom we've heard from, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for being with us. Members of the Tibetan Parliament who are here. Members of the Tibetan Parliament, welcome. And thank you to the dedicated leaders participating in this meeting, including Richard Gere, the board chair of the International Campaign for Tibet. Thank you, Richard, for being such a magnet for support for the issue of Tibet and truth and love and compassion and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Richard has used not only his celebrity, but his commitment, his attachment, his authenticity on the issue of Tibet to draw so many more people in support of the cause. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. And we have representatives of the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy. Damon Wilson is here. Thank you. And Carl, thank you, Carl, for being with us, the former head. And again, parliamentarians from 15 countries. Give yourselves an applause for coming here. Thank you. So we talk about our purpose. For decades, the Chinese government has waged a dangerous assault on human rights in Tibet. In just one of the many shocking examples, 27 years ago, the CCP abducted the 11th Panchen Lama. This issue symbolizes the plight of the Tibetan people. The Chinese government has clearly shown that it has no regard for Tibetan autonomy or identity or faith. This aggression has not only accelerated in recent years with new actions to impose mandatory political education, cruelly restrict religious freedom, expand its mass surveillance regime, and further close off Tibet to global visitors. I wanted to see Lhasa with one time when the president of China was here, Senator Dianne Feinstein has been a champion on the Tibetan issue, and there are many, as was mentioned, this has been bipartisan, both parties, bicameral, both houses of Congress. But Dianne has been a special, she and her husband, Richard Blum, who's in heaven, both such supporters of Tibet. But the two of us, I don't know if the word confronted is quite the right word, but we brought up the broached, Richard, the diplomat ever, broached the subject of Tibet with President Xi. And he was telling me how great things were there. Great things are there. Go see for yourself. I said, well, I would like to, but for 25 years I have been denied a visa to go to Tibet. So what could he do but give us a visa to go? And we saw with our own eyes what was happening there, like a Potemkin village. And in addition to seeing the faces of the people on Bakhor Street, we had three particular requests: Jiaokang Temple, the Tula Palace, and Sera Monastery. It was very hard. We had to negotiate to go see these places. But in order to see what was on our list, they had an agenda as well. They showed us their Potemkin village, where people clearly towed the party line. They demanded we visit their museum containing false history about Tibet. False history between the relationship between China and Tibet. It was so self-evident, I almost felt sorry for them. But we took pictures of it all. Reba Price, who is here with me from our staff, who's been such a connection to this issue, she took a lot of the pictures that were in Tibet. And while our host bragged about how they were gilding the roof of the temple, we said, we're not interested in gilding the roof of the temple. we're interested in what's in the minds of the children, in the minds of the children. You ought to almost just think, what are they thinking? They invited us to review a typical Tibetan home. Would you think that a typical Tibetan home would have in the living room a picture the size of that part of the wall of President Xi? But it did. And the family that we met had pictures of their children around, and they said that their daughter, who was the mother of the children, would be back shortly. So when she came, they were in different rooms, and so we said, well, how are the children? She said, what children? The whole thing was a complete fraud, a total fraud. They couldn't even verse themselves in what they were supposed to say. But it was heartbreaking for what it meant to the Tibetan people. The world has a moral duty to speak out with one voice against Beijing's abuses and stand up for the Tibetan people. That is why this forum is crucial, bringing together leaders of parliaments from all over the world to advance real autonomy for Tibet. And Richard, we in Parliament think our role is very, very important in all of this. It's such a thrill to see parliamentarians from 15 countries. Secretary Blinken made clear in his landmark address articulating U.S. policy toward China that strengthened, energized multinational coalitions like this one will be central to this effort. Know our power of us working together. Specifically to Tibet, and I was listening very carefully to what he had to say, he said there's another area of alignment we share with our allies and partners, human rights. We stand together on Tibet, where the authorities continue to wage a brutal campaign against Tibetans and their culture, language, and religious traditions. As His Holiness indicated in his comments, we were very proud that in his speech on U.S.-China relations and how we go forward, that this was a priority. One of the major challenges we face as we gather to address is the need for a consistent, unified message on the history of Tibet. In this museum, this museum of fake things in Tibet, they had that Tibet had always been part of China, which is not true. But that was their story, and they were sticking with it. But the fact is, if we're talking, as His Holiness is, about autonomy, there has to be a recognition. We saw one place a gift that Ma Tse-tung gave to the Dalai Lama, a gift that was an appropriate gift from one head of state to another head of state in the 1950s. It's a clear recognition. At the heart of their sinister campaign against Tibet are its attempts, again, to rewrite history, as I said, as if Tibet has always been a part of China. I mentioned that. Indeed, many of us saw this firsthand, and we know the truth. We know we cannot allow the government of China to weaponize this false narrative as a means to deny Tibetans the right to fully embrace, again, their faith, their culture, their heritage. At the same time, it is essential that we put diplomacy at the center of our strategy for resolving the legal status of Tibet. His Holiness would agree. He's nicer than I am. I'll tell you a story about that. As we know, it's been 12 years since the Chinese government has been willing to engage with Tibet, and since we have been they've been intensifying crackdowns. His Holiness teaches us that engaging in constructive dialogue with the CCP is central to his middle way approach. And doing so with clarity and honesty will encourage the government of China to be a more responsible global citizen. I hope so. I hope so. So the question we must answer at this convention is, how will we disrupt the status quo and restart this engagement? I hope His Holiness is right, that it's going to encourage the government of China to be more responsible global citizen, but that you hear his approach. These actions build on Congress's longstanding bipartisan, bicameral tradition of supporting the Tibetan people. from the Tibetan Policy Act of 2002 to reciprocal access to the Tibet Act of 2018 and the Strengthening Tibet Policy and Support Act of 2020. This legislation speaks clearly to the CCP, making clear, among other things, it may not interfere in the Dalai Lama's reincarnation. Indeed, this must be left exclusively to His Holiness and the Tibetan people. With great pride, the Congress is taking new action to do that. Chairman Jim McGovern, who will be part of our hospitality here as a longtime champion of human rights, plans soon to introduce the Promoting a Resolution to the Tibet-China Conflict Act. This new addition, bold bipartisan legislation, would state clearly the history of Tibet and encourage a peaceful resolution to the ultimate status of Tibet. And of course, this is about reincarnation as well. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., under Chair McGovern's leadership, the Congressional Executive Commission on China will hold a hearing titled Tibet Barrier to Tibet Barriers to Settling an Unresolved Conflict. Many of you will be there. He's the chairman of the Rules Committee. That's a very big deal in the Congress. And he wants to have it in the Rules Committee room. It's smaller in this room. So, at any event, there'll be many things to do. Some of you may want to be in that room or take turns or whatever. There are other rooms we could have been in, but he wants you all to be in the Rules Committee room, and that's a big honor for all of us. Those of us fortunate enough to travel to Dharamsala saw firsthand the aspirations of the Tibetan people on more than one occasion, especially to see the eyes of the Tibetan children. Is anything more thrilling than anyone who's been to Dharamsala to go to where the children are? Imagine the sacrifice of their families, Tibetan children, but in order to have the Tibetan culture, language, education, all of it, their children are in India. It's heartening to see that not only Tibetan autonomy, but also its sacred religion, vibrant culture, and the beautiful language are all a threat to by the CCP. Proudly, the United States remains fully committed to honoring the hopes and dreams of the Tibetan people, helping advance a future of freedom, peace, and self-determination. I want to tell you a little story. Richard's heard it, so forgive me, Richard. Before I do that, I want to say, make no mistake, the Chinese government's attempt to erase Tibetan history and way of life is an appalling violation of human rights. And if we do not speak out against human rights abuses in China because of commercial ties, we lose all moral authority to speak out against human rights anywhere. Now, I said this once in Dharamsala. We were there. In the morning, His Holiness had received people coming over the Himalayan mountain to visit him, grasping his garment, kissing his garment, crying and crying, talking about what they saw in Tibet, the brutality in the prison. Oh, it's horrible. It was historic to see firsthand testimony to the brutality of the Chinese government to the Tibetan people, fresh over the mountain, to testify to His Holiness about this. And he had me sit right next to him to hear all this. So later at lunch, he had a luncheon for all of the, we had a bipartisan delegation with us, who was going to help with visas, who was going to help with appropriations, who was going to help with one thing and another, which were part of our agenda. And they made commitments publicly to the crowd there. But at the lunch, he had a room about this size, about this many people, maybe more, lamas, young lamas from all over the area. And he had, and for them to meet our delegation. He introduced me to speak for the delegation, and in the course of my remarks, I said, if we do not speak out against human rights in China because of commercial ties, we lose all moral authority to speak out against human rights any place in the world, just as I said before. I'm finished. Sit down. His Holiness gets up and says to the lamas, now let us all pray for Nancy to rid her of her negative attitudes. That's our guy. I mean, he's so beautiful. Peace, love, compassion. My negative attitudes. I don't know if the prayers have worked yet. I'm not sure. Right now, the future of the Tibetan people is on the line. Together, we must continue to stand with them. There are roles for all of us to play. On behalf of the Congress, thank you all for your partnership and best wishes for a productive conference. I do want to say I'm so honored that so many parliamentarians are here recognizing our role. So let's not consider this a meeting, but a beginning of a conversation that we will have together on the ongoing. Thank you for the honor for me to participate. Tashi Delay.
Thank you, Speaker Pelosi, for your heartfelt remarks. Oftentimes, we Tibetans particularly assume that the international support, particularly among people, is because we Tibetans launch a peaceful struggle. That is part of the reason, of course. But our more important reason is what His Holiness outlined in his message, because the Tibetan culture and civilization has something to offer to the world. And who better than our next speaker, Mr. Richard Gere. I'm proud to call him chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet, a dedicated individual who has realized the potential of Tibetan culture, come to appreciate it, and then together, while sort of enjoying the fruits of Tibetan culture, is giving back to the Tibetan community in many ways. He has been a steadfast supporter of our late chairman, Mr. Lodi Gere. Mr. Richard Gere, thank you so much.
And how do I follow His Holiness and the Speaker? I mean, everything has been said with great humor and insight and compassion. And I just want to reiterate, nothing that has happened in Congress in the last 35 years has happened without this lady. And she's had enormous help, you know, on both sides of the aisle, and people in all walks of life, but this is the engine that has made everything happen. So, you know, in the history of Tibet, this woman is going to be remembered forever. Thank you, Speaker Pelosi. Look, I've known all of you for a long time, some better than others, but I'm trying to remember the first conference that I went to. I think it was in Italy. Was there one before that I went to? I can't remember. 2009. Was that the first one? I think that was the first one. And, you know, we were doing other things. You know, I'm always finding myself doing it. And I was there, and that's where I started meeting some of you. It was at that point. And you know, we all are kind of in our own bubble doing these things. And we're like going through a jungle with a machete, because we're having to find our own way. There's no signposts that have been left for us of how to do this work. We have people who have a big machete and, you know, seem to have more fortitude than the rest of us. But to have 15 countries represented here, and many more in terms of watching it now and have given their how many altogether? 28 countries have been involved with this. Yeah, no, they're joining everywhere. It's not just this group here. We have to remember that the only way we're going to succeed is to do this with each other. And we'll learn from each other. I've just thrown out my whole speech, by the way, so I'm just, obviously we have at ICT, we've been focusing on Washington, but we focus also on Berlin, and we focus on Amsterdam and in Brussels. And we have very good teams there, but we have limited resources. We're not the US government. And we think we're doing a pretty good job. We feel that with the help of the speaker and other people over the years, Tom Lantos and all the other wonderful people, Dianne Feinstein, it's very, very important to this cause, and Dick Blum. But there have been, over the decades, many wonderful people in government who have been able to reach across the aisle, also reach across their own power structures, even within each party, and saw something important about this cause that has touched all of us and has touched them. And not always the same way. We've had people involved with ICT and with Tibet who are so politically right, I felt embarrassed to be with them, but I could feel they were being touched in their heart, the same way that I was. That's how we've gotten here, is being honest, authentic, straightforward, inclusive, skillful, careful, and having enormous energy that we will not stop. Now, any other group would have stopped by now. And we've seen that with refugee communities around the world. They had a burst of energy in the beginning and it just went away. And the opposite has happened here. The Tibetan cause has increased over the years, even when the focus point has been on other issues and other cultures. We were talking to our Uyghur friends earlier. They look to the Tibetan cause of how can they get their history known, their present known, their pain known, their suffering known. And they look to the Tibetan world, to Washington for sure, but the whole Tibetan world, of how did they do this? How did they make their cause known? And especially with nonviolence, primarily nonviolence. One of the extraordinary things about the Tibetan cause, there aren't headlines about the Tibetans in a world of extreme violence. But as I keep saying, nonviolence works, but it takes a long time. But once it works, it's finished, it's complete. There's no residue left. The purity of our hearts, you talk to His Holiness. His Holiness has been giving these talks since he was 16 years old to the world. It's still about compassion and love and authenticity. That's why the Tibetan movement has gotten here, and it still touches all of us. In different ways. We come from different places, we have different agendas in the world. Our families, have their own issues, our cultures have their own issues, but there's something about His Holiness, and I also noticed this maybe about 10 years ago. His Holiness didn't look Asian anymore. I don't know if you all noticed this. He looks universal now. But there's something in this that has touched what we consider the good guys and the bad guys in this. And I think that's why we're seeing this pushback from the Chinese, that we all think of, why are they doing this? Because it's challenging something deep inside of themselves. And, Buchang has been articulating this quite well. This is a lack of legitimacy, a lack of authenticity that is unmistakable with His Holiness. They couldn't stand to be in the same place with His Holiness because it would be so clear. You have something false and something true, something generous and something controlling. And this is always going to be a sticking point to them. And understandably so. All of us, I feel this way around Nancy Pelosi. So authentic. She's got so much energy, more than mine. She's smarter than me. She's funnier than me. She's got everything going for her. But we're still touched in the same way by this idea of truth and authenticity. And ultimately that we can do it. We can make this happen. Can't do it today. One of the teaching I had with His Holiness at some point, and he was saying, look, you know, what you want, and I was talking about illusory bodies and whatever, so let's be realistic. That's probably not going to happen in this lifetime. Could. He says it takes a long time and an enormous effort to purify your mind. An enormous effort and a lot of time to purify your mind. So we see this with these great lamas. They've put in the work to purify their minds. You know, there's a story that I've told many times that still continues to touch me. The only time that I was allowed in Tibet was in '93. And it was because they wanted me. I got the call, actually I'd said something on the Academy Awards. And I realized it was a moment where it was the first time that China was showing the Academy Awards live. And I was presenting for something, I forget what it was up there. And I realized there were 1 billion people watching this. And probably, I don't know who was president then of China. Who would that have been?
China?
Zheng Zemin? It was probably Zheng Zemin at that point. And I thought, he's probably watching this with his kids right now. And the kids were movie people, and they said he probably roped him in and his grandchildren that are watching this thing. And I gave a speech, and it was the best I could do about being generous. And again, without attacking in some stupid way, but telling the truth and presenting the possibility of love and compassion being the answer to the problem. And so a couple of weeks later, there was a call from the Chinese. They were asking me to go to their Academy Awards, which was called, I think, the Golden Rooster Awards in Guangzhou. And I didn't even return the call. I mean, they'd been so hostile to me before, I thought, you know, this is something that's very dangerous for me. Well, they kept calling and calling. And I ended up talking to some CIA friends of mine, and they said, look, this is a very high-profile thing. They won't do anything to you there. But, you know, make sure you've got good people around you. But you're going to be okay. So I said, I will go, but I have to go to Tibet. They said, absolutely not. So, a very long story, but they said, okay, you can go to Tibet. And then I said, well, not just me, I have to take my teacher, Chungla Rato Rinpoche, who we just lost a couple of weeks ago. 100 years old, still teaching, still doing extraordinary things, but he passed away just several weeks ago. Long story. They agreed. He hadn't been there since '59. And with Ken Rinpoche, Nicky Vreeland, who was his attendant, who is now the first Westerner who is an abbot of a Tibetan monastery, Ratu Monastery. And a writer friend of mine. I couldn't tell him it was a writer because they never would have allowed him to come. He was actually a reporter. So I fudged that somehow. But we all went to Tibet, and we were watched, but we weren't courted like you were. We got to go places. I think they actually thought that if I saw Tibet, I would be much more inclined towards the Chinese version of reality, which, of course, surprised me. Anyone who has their eyes open going to Lhasa, you're going to have your mind blown at how radically the Tibetan culture has been suppressed. So anyhow, we were there for 10 days or so. And every day there would be a line of 50 to 100 people waiting outside of Chungla Rato Rinpoche's room in the morning. And they were all crying. And they all wanted to tell their story. And Rinpoche just very kindly listened to their stories one after the other, embraced them, blessed them. And he was literally eating the pain and suffering off of them as they came to him. And they were cleansed, the best one could think in that situation, but they were able to tell their story for the first time, especially to someone who was a High Lama who had left in '59. I was absorbing this whole experience, and I went off by myself a few days before we left, and I went to a small shrine, and there were a couple of nuns walking around, and one was limping, and that was the older one. There was a younger one that was kind of helping her going around a large prayer wheel. And I had an interpreter with me, and I started talking to them, and they said they had just gotten released from prison. And so, what was your offense? I said, we just marched around our nunnery. We just marched around with the Tibetan flag. That's all we did. And they were arrested.
That's dangerous.
And they were tortured badly for many days, many weeks, many months. And the woman who was limping hadn't recovered mentally or physically. Clearly there's challenges there. The other one who was able to speak to me reluctantly told me kind of tortures which you can imagine they had to endure. And I said, look, can you ever forgive your torturers? And she took a deep breath and she said, the answer to that is so much larger than our suffering. So much bigger. These men who tortured us are acting out of their own pain and ignorance. I said, what are you going to do now? I said, when we rest up, we'll go back to the convent. And what will you do is, we'll take a Tibetan flag and we'll march again. And we will be arrested. Then we will be tortured. And then we will do it again. And we will do it again. That's why we're working so hard for these Tibetan brothers and sisters. For that essence of Tibetan culture that His Holiness obviously manifests in the world for everyone to see, this extraordinary sense of genuine love and compassion, selflessness. When His Holiness, it's very interesting how he gave this talk. He appreciates the work everyone in this room is doing, everyone, no matter how big the result or how small it is, but the fact that people are working on this subject is so meaningful. But what he's saying is, it's got to come from the right place. It's got to come from love and compassion. It will have real power then. The resonances from that. And I think that's for all of us. Nonviolence is not a tactic. Not a tactic, not a strategy. It's a way of being. That's why this man who has no power other than his own mind and his heart are such a threat to the Chinese Communist Party, because he's completely genuine in love and compassion and telling the truth. I remember one time I was talking to His Holiness. He stuck out his tongue. He said, see this tongue? You know, like that. He said, this tongue has never lied. Which of us can say that? Our tongue has never lied. So that's the core. That's the core of what we're trying to do, is making a world where tongues never lie anymore. Our own tongues first. Then that goes out to the rest of the world. So to make that really powerful is we do it together. And so this is a moment of us holding hands and purifying our tongues, that we never lie again. And our emotions are really pure. Whether you're a Christian, this is a Catholic of the highest order, but she's one of the best Buddhists I ever met. We can do this together. It won't happen tomorrow. Purifying ourselves takes a long time and enormous effort. Purifying the world, even the Buddha couldn't do that. Jesus Christ couldn't do that. But we make a beginning. You know, this is one lifetime we have here. I have no doubt we've all met each other in other lifetimes, and we'll meet each other in future lifetimes. And we'll be on the same voyage of, how do we make it better? How do we make lives better? How do we remove the stupidity and the ignorance? Now, we're doing this from a political point of view. And there's a lot of expertise here. I mean, I look around here, there's decades and decades of work that people have done on themselves, I see in this room. And the skill and the experience that you can bring to this movement and share with each other. You know, the Tibetan movement is always going to need the guidance of this group. You know, and you see it in the Tibetan community, the decades of work they've done on themselves to create a level of sophistication that they can function anywhere in the world. I mean, it's kind of amazing. You know, one generation, two at the most, to be able to function anywhere in the world at a high level and to be accepted is the real deal. I mean, it's amazing. The success of this refugee community all over the world. But I only want to leave you with that. We've been able to do a lot here in Washington, mostly because of this person here. But because we focused on it, our karma was correct to create a tipping point where not only is it in policy now, but it's actually in U.S. law that certain things have to be done in terms of Tibet. We need to get it into other countries. We have to get these policies that have been successful here, learn from us how we were able to do it. It didn't happen overnight. It took 30 years to do some of these things, all of them. But we need to learn from each other, and we're certainly willing to help, too, to come and be part of this movement all over the world. It's one of my big mantras is we can't do it alone here in Washington. We've come a long way, but what gives it real power is when we have our like-minded cultures and countries around the world doing it with us. And the Chinese can't pick off one country, you know, isolate one and destroy them. The only way we can do it is together. There's a line, I don't know why I keep thinking of this, it's in one of Bob Dylan's best songs. It's called The Chimes of Freedom, a very early song of his. And there's one song that kills me in this. It says, "And to every hung-up person in the whole wide universe, we gazed upon the chimes of freedom flashing." We gazed upon the chimes of freedom flashing. That's why we're here. Thank you very much. I have to apologize because this was a really good speech I was supposed to give.
Print it.
Put it on the internet.
Thank you very much, and as expected, Richard's remarks came with a bit of teaching too, so I think we'll bear that in mind in practice. In the post-1959 period, I think the Tibetan people, particularly the refugee community, have been very fortunate to get support from governments, organizations, individuals, etc., in the field of education, health, culture, etc. But one important thing that His Holiness always said was the Tibetan community should adopt democratic values. And in order to inculcate this new political system within the Tibetan culture as a whole, the National Endowment for Democracy has played a very important role under Ka and now under Mr. Damon. And so it's my privilege to welcome Mr. Damon, who is not just president of the National Endowment for Democracy, but comes with a great pedigree, to say a diplomat who has worked also in other NGOs, who has seen different facets of the world, and now who's come here to lead this very effective organization that helps governments throughout the world and communities throughout the world path towards democracy.
Chung, thank you for that introduction. And Richard, that was extraordinary. Richard said it was impossible to follow a video message from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Speaker Pelosi. Well, you think it's impossible to follow Richard Gere, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Speaker Pelosi. Madam Speaker, thank you for your extraordinary leadership for the cause of Tibet, but for so much of the cause of democracy, freedom, human rights around the world. It's extraordinary. So many people count on your leadership. We're delighted to welcome you, Speaker, to Washington. It's an honor to have you here, and it's a real pleasure to have the Sikyong back in Washington. We had him at the endowment earlier on his first official visit. Welcome back with so many members of Parliament. And Richard, thank you for your extraordinary leadership for this cause. It's really quite remarkable. I feel an incredible privilege just to stand alongside Tibetan leadership and Tibet's longtime supporters. I am relatively new to the endowment, and I follow the leadership of Carl Gershman, who really helped ensure that the Tibetan cause would be at the heart of NED's support for democracy and freedom around the world. And we are committed to continuing that with the same humility, the same commitment, the same dedication. As the endowment is America's foundation for freedom and democracy, we will stand by the Tibetan people. And so today's 8th World Parliamentarians Convention, it's an extraordinary gathering. Parliamentarians from around the world, from 28 countries, with those online, coming together here in Washington to develop a global strategy on Tibet with Tibetan parliamentarians and leadership. And it comes at a critical time. Around the world, you see this every day, that we're seeing a deepening conflict between democracy and authoritarianism, something that President Biden has given such a voice to. We're seeing authoritarian regimes becoming increasingly confident in their repression at home and aggressive in asserting their interests and claims abroad. Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine is just the most recent abhorrent example of this. But Beijing's export of the tools, the tactics, and the technologies of repression, this represents a massive challenge to democracy around the world, as many of you know, and many of you know firsthand. As democracies confront this growing threat, it's vital that we look to and that we support courageous democratic movements like the Tibetan people, who have been on the front lines of this struggle between democracy and authoritarianism for over 7 decades, with truth, with authenticity, compassion, and love. It is a compelling arsenal against the tyranny of tyrants. So 72 years ago, Tibet was invaded by an authoritarian power engaged in an illegal act of aggression against its smaller neighbor. And the Tibetan people rose up to defend their homeland and their very existence as a nation and as a people. And since then, they've undergone unspeakable suffering. We've heard a little bit about that from those firsthand visits. Loss of life, destruction of an ancient civilization. But despite these tragic circumstances, Tibetans inside Tibet continue to fight back, but with love, with compassion, with peace coming from their hearts, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama said. And that's powerful. It's very powerful. It's threatening. And so even today, they are finding ways to press for their fundamental rights. And we at the endowment regularly hear from our Tibetan partners and friends. Tibetans inside Tibet, at the grassroots level, are challenging the rule of the Chinese Communist Party and seeking out innovative ways to access outside information. They're sharing vital political updates with trusted outside networks, taking bold actions to defend their language, their religion, their culture, and, as seen in 160 self-immolations, even sacrificed their lives. Like 25-year-old Siswang Norbu, a popular singer who set himself on fire in Lhasa on February 25th this year to protest Chinese rule. But for hope for a brighter future, Tibetans in Tibet return to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, his message, his extraordinary message of love, and the Tibetan Exile Administration as a model for a future democratic Tibet. Today, the exile community of 150,000 Tibetans, it boasts a democratic government guided by a constitution, a democratically elected parliament, with many of the members of parliament who are here with us today, as well as a democratically elected president, a judiciary, a vibrant civil society, and an independent media. Establishing a fully functioning democratic government on foreign soil, this is an incredible, extraordinary achievement. The Tibetan people, under the guidance of His Holiness, have turned their suffering and their loss into this resilience, enduring freedom movement that offers hope to so many other suffering people with similar injustices, from Uyghurs who are with us today to Hong Kongers to Chinese Democrats. And in this period of democratic recession and rising authoritarianism, the world needs sources of inspiration and models of thriving democracies more than ever. The Tibetan cause is that model. Democratic renewal begins with democratic solidarity. As you said, Richard, it's when we are working together in common cause that a nonviolent movement is powerful. And the Tibetan movement must succeed not just for the Tibetan people, but for the sake of democracy and freedom around the world. And that, for me, is the purpose of why we're all here, of why we're gathering, of why you have come from your own countries to be part of this bigger conversation. This gathering reflects what is already a galvanized community, a community of lawmakers and activists from nations who stand united in their resolve to support Tibet in its struggle for democracy and freedom. And for our part, the endowment will remain steadfast and unwavering in its commitment to Tibet. And as president of the endowment, I assure our Tibetan partners of this. Even the most seemingly powerful authoritarian regimes are impermanent, as our Tibetan Buddhist friends would say. Opportunities for greater freedom will inevitably present themselves. And democracy movements like the Tibetans, and most likely to succeed when they are prepared, unified, and resilient. So we're deeply proud of having supported the Tibetan people for over 3 decades in their pursuit of freedom, democracy, and human rights. And our civil society partners are engaged in innovative activities, including amplifying the voices of Tibetans inside Tibet to the outside world, identifying new and safe ways to send uncensored news and resources into Tibet, forging cross-movement alliances among Tibetans and Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Southern Mongolians, Taiwanese, and other like-minded partners, and empowering, importantly, the next generation of promising Tibetan youth to continue leading the Tibet movement. You heard from the speaker about the power of the next generation of Tibetan democratic activists. We're proud of the endowment to be part of that tradition. I want to acknowledge Pema Tulasong, who's with us, Palki Tenzin, who's also with us as well, and Pema, who is helping us expand NED's support for the Tibetan democracy movement. And of course, I want to recognize the role of NED's founding president, Carl Gershman, who has played a central role in building up the endowment's rock-solid support for this just cause. As Carl well knows, a highlight in the endowment's history is our relationship with Tibet, and it was our awarding His Holiness the Dalai Lama our Democracy Service Medal, NED's highest honor, recognizing his outstanding efforts to advance the cause of human rights and democracy around the world, an extraordinary honor for us. We were also honored to welcome Sikhyongpen Pinsering to the endowment on his first official visit to Washington. We're pleased to see you back here, and I look forward to my own visit to you in Dharamsala next year to commemorate the Tibetan National Uprising. But this is just the beginning. I know the endowment itself that we can do more. We can all do more together. And so together, working in common cause, led by our Tibetan partners on the ground, who inspire us every day with their resilience, their ingenuity, let us rededicate ourselves to their cause. And I think we can find extraordinary opportunities to broaden and deepen our support, to expand this community of supporters of this cause around the world, to continue to advance legislation, as we've talked about, in parliaments around democracies around the world. And I challenge us all in the next 2 days to think boldly, how can we work together to support an offense in favor of freedom? Let's not only play defense, let's think about how we support our values with pride and confidence, and let us put the democratic aspirations of the Tibetan people front and center, help them forge their own destiny. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you. Look forward to the next speaker. Thank you.
And that's the conclusion of this session. But before we do that, the Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament has mementos to offer. And before he does that, I just wanted to end with a quote from one of the first supporters of Tibet in India, Jayaprakash Narayan. Because today we talked about challenges, today we talked about hope, today we talked about optimism, and we also talked about the struggle being long. And for all of us to get encouragement, let's bear in mind what Jayaprakash Narayan said early on. He said, Tibet will not die because there's no death for human spirit. communism will not succeed because humans will not be slaves forever.